I still remember the first day I stepped onto the grounds of Old Crossfield High. It wasn't like any other school I'd attended. There was a peculiar weight in the air, as though the land itself was thick with secrets no one dared to speak aloud. The buildings loomed like forgotten sentinels, their weathered bricks stained with the passage of decades. Massive, rusting chain-link fences lined the perimeter, topped with spirals of barbed wire. A bizarre choice for a school, even in a rough neighborhood. I should have taken it as a sign. They told us it was for security reasons. But no one ever explained what or who they were keeping out or in. It wasn't until my junior year that I learned the truth. It began on a gray October afternoon. Thick, low-hanging clouds suffocated the sky, painting everything in shades of ash and sorrow. The bell had just rung for final period, and a storm was rolling in from the west, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something metallic. I was late to Mr. Rollins' history class again, which meant sneaking through the back corridor near the east wing, a part of the school most students avoided. The floor tiles there were cracked and uneven, and the flickering overhead lights buzzed like dying insects. I'd passed it 100 times before. But that day something was different. The old maintenance door at the end of the hallway, the one bolted shut with rusted chains, was ajar. Just barely. A sliver of darkness peered out from the opening like a watching eye. I slowed, feeling an inexplicable chill settle over me. The hallway was silent, save for the occasional drip of water from a ceiling leak. I glanced around, half expecting someone to jump out, but the place was deserted. Curiosity gnawed at me. Logic screamed to leave it alone. But when you're 17 and bored, logic doesn't stand a chance. I pushed the door open. It emitted a shrill creak, one that seemed to echo far longer than it should have, vanishing into a depth I couldn't see. A narrow staircase descended into the earth, swallowed by darkness. There was no light, no sounds from below. Just the oppressive scent of mold, rust, and something like old gunpowder. I should have turned back. Should have closed the door and kept walking. But instead I fished out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut a thin path through the darkness, revealing concrete walls etched with deep scratches. Not graffiti. Scratches. As if someone or something had clawed at the stone. I hesitated at the top of the stairs. An uneasy knot twisted in my stomach. And then I heard it. Faint rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere below. It didn't sound mechanical. It sounded deliberate. My heart hammered against my ribs. My better judgment told me it was just pipes or old machinery, relics of a long-abandoned boiler room. But a smaller, more primal voice whispered that I was about to unearth something I was never meant to find. I took a step down, then another. Each footfall sent a brittle echo through the stairwell. The air grew colder with every step, the smell of rot intensifying. Halfway down, my flashlight beam landed on a metal plaque bolted to the wall. Its surface was tarnished and corroded, but I could still make out the inscription. Crossfield Military Installation. East Sector Access. Froze. Military Installation. This wasn't a storage basement. This was something else entirely. I snapped a photo of the plaque. My phone screen flickered for a split second, like it didn't want to capture the image, but then the picture saved. Kept moving. At the bottom of the staircase, the corridor stretched out in both directions, its walls lined with metal doors, each marked with faded stenciled numbers and cryptic labels. CP-47. Level 3 Armory. Project Nightfall. None of it made sense. The rhythmic tapping continued, louder now, coming from the left corridor. I followed it, my heart rattling in my chest like a drumbeat. As I passed one of the doors, I caught sight of a smear of what looked like dried blood on the handle. It was old, almost rust-brown, but unmistakable. I swallowed hard, the sickening realization creeping in. This place wasn't abandoned. Something had been here. Recently. The corridor ended at a massive steel door, its surface dented and scored as though something immense had tried to batter its way out. Painted in faded black letters across the top was a single word. Quarantine. The tapping came from within. I pressed my ear against the cold metal. The sound was distinct now, knuckles rapping in a slow, deliberate rhythm. 3 knocks, buzz, 3 more, buzz, and then a voice. Weak, scratchy, desperate. Help me! Every instinct I had screamed to run, to get out of there and never come back. But my feet stayed rooted to the ground. I lifted the rusted latch. It groaned in protest but shifted. The door cracked open. A rush of freezing air hit me, carrying with it a stench so foul I gagged, a putrid blend of decay, sweat, and chemicals. My flashlight barely pierced the gloom, but what it revealed was worse than any horror movie I'd ever seen. The room was a cell, and inside was a man, or what was left of one. He sat against the far wall, his arms shackled to the floor with thick iron cuffs. His skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched thin over bones that jutted like blades. His eyes, wide and sunken, gleamed in the light. "Please," he rasped, his voice like sandpaper on glass. I stumbled back, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear him. What is this place?" I stammered. He coughed, a thick, dark fluid dribbling down his chin. "Don't trust them," he croaked. "They never left, still here in the walls." "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, a loud metallic clang echoed through the corridor behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam darting across the empty hallway. And then I saw it. Figure. Hulking. Dressed in what looked like a tattered military hazmat suit. The face shield was cracked, revealing rotted, leathery flesh beneath. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, the sound of heavy boots thudding against the concrete. I backed away, panic flooding my veins. The man in the cell screamed, "Go! Before it sees you." I turned and ran. My legs felt like lead, but adrenaline shoved me forward, up the narrow staircase, every footfall chased by the relentless thud of those heavy boots. I didn't stop until I burst through the maintenance door, slamming it shut behind me. I bolted down the hallway, out of the east wing, out into the storm. The rain hit me in sheets, but I didn't care. I ran all the way home, not daring to look back. That night, lying in my bed, soaked and trembling, I stared at the photo of the plaque on my phone. The name of the installation burned into my memory. And I knew, whatever they'd done beneath Crossfield High, it wasn't over. And tomorrow I had to go back. Because I had to know the truth. Even if it killed me. The following day felt like a blur. I barely slept, and every time I closed my eyes, the image of that man in the cell haunted me. His desperate cries echoed in my mind, each one more frantic than the last. But I couldn't forget what he said. Don't trust them. Who were they? The military. The people who built this place. Or something darker, something worse. Had to go back. By the time I stepped off the bus that afternoon, my nerves were on edge. The weather had shifted overnight, the storm clearing to a piercingly cold, clear sky. The kind of sky that always felt wrong, like it was hiding something. I made my way to the east wing as soon as the last bell rang. I hadn't told anyone about the horrors I'd seen. Not my best friend, Kate, not even my sister who lived in the same house. I couldn't explain it. Who would believe me? As I approached the door I'd opened the day before, my heart thudded painfully against my chest. The hallway was silent. Not a single soul in sight. I pushed the door open again, this time with far less hesitation. The staircase that had led me to the horrors below was still there, untouched. The walls, now even darker, seemed to whisper with the weight of something unseen, something lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. But there was no time to waste. I had to go deeper. I descended again, my flashlight's beam slicing through the gloom. The air felt colder this time, more oppressive, as though something were watching me from the shadows. My breath came out in shallow bursts, the damp air clinging to my skin. At the bottom of the stairs I hesitated. I could still hear that low, rhythmic tapping in the distance. But it wasn't just tapping anymore. It was scratching, clawing. The sound grew louder, closer. I gripped the railing and moved forward, slower this time, careful not to make any noise. My feet nearly slipped on the slick floor as I approached the corridor where the steel door labeled "Quarantine" stood. My flashlight flickered again, casting erratic shadows on the walls. As I drew closer, the scratching intensified. "Please." The voice came again. This time it wasn't a man's voice. It was deeper, rougher, with an unnatural rasp that sent a chill down my spine. "Please, help me." I pushed the door open further, my hands shaking. The stench hit me before I saw anything, a wave of decay so pungent I could barely keep from gagging. And then the lights buzzed to life. It wasn't the flickering of a broken bulb, but a deliberate surge of power. The sterile white light reflected off cold steel surfaces, revealing more than I had expected. There were more rooms than I thought. Rooms stretching far beyond the initial cell I had seen. I turned the corner, following the sound of the voice. The walls were lined with large glass tanks. Some were filled with clear liquid, others with a thick, yellowish substance I couldn't identify. Each tank contained something. Some were empty, but many held grotesque, twisted shapes. The dim lighting barely illuminated the horrifying creatures inside, their bodies distorted and mangled, as if they had been forcibly altered. The scratching was louder now, more frantic. I rounded another corner and froze. A figure emerged from one of the tanks. First I thought it was a shadow, but as it stepped closer, I realized with sickening clarity that it was no shadow. It was a man, or what had once been a man. His skin was thin and stretched tight over bone. His body was contorted at unnatural angles, his arms too long, his fingers ending in sharp, needle-like claws. His eyes, wide and unblinking, were hollow pits of darkness. A ragged breath escaped from between his cracked lips. "Help me, please." I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just a person. It was a monstrosity, something made, not born. But by who? By what? Before I could back away, a voice boomed from the end of the hallway. "What are you doing here?" I spun around, panic seizing my chest. A soldier, or what used to be a soldier, stood at the end of the corridor. His uniform was torn, stained with something dark. His eyes were vacant, his movements stiff and mechanical. He raised a hand, pointing directly at me. "You shouldn't be here." Bolted. My breath came in ragged gasps as I turned and ran back toward the staircase. The sound of heavy boots followed, echoing off the concrete walls like thunder. I could feel the soldier behind me, his presence closing in like a predator. My legs burned as I pushed forward, my eyes locked on the stairs ahead. But just as I reached them, a loud bang rang out, the force of it slamming into my chest like a physical blow. I stumbled, my body crashing to the ground. Before I could regain my bearings, a pair of cold hands grabbed my arms, hauling me to my feet. The soldier's face was inches from mine now, his breath cold against my skin. "You shouldn't have come back," he hissed. I struggled to break free, but his grip was like iron. My eyes darted around, searching for any way out. That's when I noticed the second soldier, standing in the doorway to my left. And behind him another door, this one open just a crack. I had no choice. With all the strength I could muster, I wrenched myself free from the soldier's grasp and bolted for the door. I could hear the soldiers shouting, but I didn't look back. The door slammed shut behind me, and I found myself in a small, dimly lit room. I took a few seconds to catch my breath, my heart pounding in my chest, before I dared to look around. The room was filled with rows upon rows of file cabinets, their metal frames cold and imposing. Most of the drawers were open, their contents scattered across the floor. Papers, documents, photos. I stepped forward, my curiosity getting the better of me. I knelt down, flipping through a few files, my hands trembling. Suddenly I froze. There, in the last file, was a photo. It was a picture of the school, but not as it was now. This photo was taken years ago, before it had become the old, dilapidated building I knew. In the background, the old military base loomed large, its barbed wire fences intact, its buildings standing proud and untouched. But in the foreground of the picture were people. Dozens of them. All of them staring directly at the camera, their faces eerily blank, as if they were waiting for something. Or someone. I flipped the photo over. There, in a hurried scrawl, was a single word. Subject 47. I couldn't breathe. What had they done to these people? Before I could process what I was seeing, a voice called out from the hallway. You shouldn't have seen that. The voice in the hallway wasn't a soldier. It wasn't even human. I froze, my body still trembling from the adrenaline coursing through me. The room around me seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, as though something was slowly closing in, preparing to swallow me whole. I slowly turned toward the voice, but there was no one there. Only the faintest sound of shuffling footsteps, barely audible over the thundering in my chest. I wasn't alone. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady beneath me. The photo, the one that said Subject 47, still lay in my hand, its weight like a burning reminder of everything that had been hidden from us. What was the purpose of this place? What had they been doing here? Had to know. But as I moved toward the door, ready to make my escape, a shadow passed by the crack in the doorway. Figure. Moving with a rigid, almost mechanical gait. Another soldier. Or something else entirely. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped back into the darkness of the room, trying to make myself as small as possible. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then silence. I didn't dare move. I barely dared to breathe. But after what seemed like an eternity, I heard it again. That voice. Closer now. You shouldn't be here. The words were distorted, garbled, like they were coming from a broken speaker. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized, whoever or whatever was speaking wasn't human. Suddenly, the door to the small room burst open with a violent crash. I barely had time to react before the soldier was on me, his hands gripping my shoulders with the force of steel. His breath was putrid, thick with the stench of death. I screamed, pushing against him with all my strength, but his hold tightened, almost as though he was absorbing my struggles. His eyes, pale and unblinking, locked onto mine, and for a brief moment I thought I saw something wrong. Something alive. You shouldn't have seen that. The soldier's voice crackled as it escaped from deep within his chest, each word a rasp, a sound like sand scraping against metal. In a panic, I reached for the nearest object, my fingers brushing against a jagged piece of broken metal from a filing cabinet. I swung it blindly, slashing across his face. The soldier recoiled, his head jerking back. For a split second I thought I'd done something, anything to slow him down. But when he came back at me, his face was worse than before. His skin had split open in several places, revealing a deep, sickly red flesh beneath. His jaw hung at an odd angle, unnaturally wide, as though his mouth could stretch much farther than it should. That's when I realized. His mouth was full of teeth. And not just any teeth. They were sharp, jagged, like a predator's. I screamed again, this time for my life, and with everything I had left, I shoved him off me and ran. I didn't even look back. I was on the run, my legs pumping furiously as I dashed through the dark corridors of the basement. I couldn't tell if the soldier was still behind me. I didn't care. Had to get out. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. What had they done to these people? I rounded a corner, not realizing how far I'd run until I saw the door that led back to the main hallway. The exit was in sight. But then I saw it. A large, shadowed figure stood in front of the door, blocking my way. Its silhouette was monstrous, towering in the dim light of the hallway. It didn't move, but I could feel its presence, like the very air around it was charged with some malevolent energy. For a second I thought it was another soldier, but something was wrong. This wasn't a person. This was something else. The figure's skin was mottled, like rotting flesh clinging to a skeletal frame. Its limbs were long and twisted, its fingers ending in sharp claws that scraped against the floor. But the worst part, its face. Had no face. Just a smooth, pale surface where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. A blank, featureless mask. I froze, unable to move. The figure didn't move either, but I could feel it watching me. It felt like its eyes were on me, even though there were none. I could almost hear its thoughts in my head, the echo of something ancient and hateful reverberating inside me. "You're not supposed to be here." The voice wasn't garbled like the soldiers. It was calm, chilling, almost pleading. I took a step back, my heart racing, my body screaming to run. But the figure didn't let me. Its long arm shot out faster than I could react, grabbing my wrist with terrifying strength. "You've seen too much." It pulled me toward it, and as I struggled to break free, I saw something in its hand. File. One that looked just like the ones I had seen in the room with the photo of Subject 47. "Don't make the same mistake." The voice was low, rasping. I thrashed harder, trying to pull away, but it was no use. The grip on my wrist tightened, and the world around me began to darken. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the file. The one marked, Subject 47. I awoke in a dimly lit room, my body aching as though I had been crushed beneath something heavy. My mind was foggy, disoriented. The cold concrete beneath me felt uncomfortably familiar, and the metallic scent of blood lingered in the air. It took a moment for my senses to return, and when they did, panic hit me like a ton of bricks. Where was I? I tried to move, but my wrists were bound to a chair. The cold metal dug into my skin as I strained against the restraints. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. What had happened? How had I gotten here? The last thing I remembered was the faceless figure grabbing my wrist, pulling me toward it. I had seen the file. Subject 47. That had to mean something. But before I could make sense of it all, I was here. Somewhere far deeper beneath the school than I ever thought possible. The room was small, claustrophobic. The walls were lined with the same cold gray metal that seemed to have consumed every corner of this cursed place. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow over everything. I scanned the room, my pulse quickening. There were no windows. The only door was sealed shut, and I couldn't see any way out. No ventilation. No escape. I was trapped. The silence was broken only by the faint sound of scraping metal, that same horrible clawing sound I had heard before. But this time it wasn't in the distance. It was closer. Much closer. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was the same soldier. The one with the grotesque, contorted face. But now there was something worse about him. His eyes were empty, hollow, as if whatever humanity had remained in him had been drained. His skin hung loosely from his bones, the pale flesh sagging in places it shouldn't. His mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Not human teeth, but something far more monstrous. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. "You should have stayed away," he hissed. His voice more guttural now, like the croak of a dying animal. "You shouldn't have seen what's down here." I wanted to scream, to cry out for help, but my voice caught in my throat. Every fiber of my being told me to get out of there, to run, to escape, but my body refused to move. It was like some invisible force was holding me in place, keeping me there, paralyzed. The soldier reached into his torn uniform and pulled out the very same file I had seen earlier. Subject 47. "Do you want to know what happened?" he asked, his lips curling into a twisted grin. He nodded. There was no turning back now. I needed to know. The soldier's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I saw something flicker behind the empty darkness. Something like regret or maybe fear. This place, it wasn't always like this. This school, it was built on top of something. Something they thought they could control. His voice dropped to a whisper, as if he was afraid someone might overhear. They didn't realize what they were messing with. They thought they could manipulate things, create a weapon. But what they made was a monster. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. They tried to create a soldier, a super soldier, someone who could survive anything. They thought if they combined human DNA with something otherworldly, they could make an invincible force. But they were wrong. He paused, as if he was reliving the horrors of that time. They were experimenting on us. Me. On hundreds of others. But when they brought in Subject 47, things went too far. They didn't know what they were dealing with. It was ancient, powerful, something that should have never been disturbed. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I absorbed his words. He was talking about them. The experiments. The things I'd seen in the tanks. Subject 47. It wasn't human. It was something darker. Something they couldn't control. The moment they tried to bring it into this world, everything went wrong. We were the first to die. The first to become part of it. My heart pounded in my chest. It all made sense now. The twisted soldiers. The monstrous figures. They weren't soldiers. They were victims. Victims of an experiment gone horribly wrong. And then the soldier leaned in closer. His breath cold against my face. You're not supposed to know this. You were never supposed to find out. I flinched as he reached for the file and began to open it. His shaking hands revealing the contents inside. It was filled with photos, maps, and documents, but one photo caught my eye. It was a group of people just like the one in the previous photo. But this time, they were gathered around a massive altar. The altar was surrounded by symbols, glowing with an unnatural light. And at the center there was a figure, cloaked in shadow. Its features were indistinct, but it exuded an aura of malice so powerful that it felt as though the photo itself was alive. This is what we were trying to summon, the soldier whispered. But it's not just in the photos. Still here. In this building. It's in the walls. In the air. It wants you. Suddenly, the room grew colder, the temperature dropping so quickly I could see my breath in front of me. The walls seemed to pulse like they were alive, moving in time with the beating of my own heart. I tried to pull away from the soldier, but the restraints dug into my wrists, preventing me from escaping. I struggled, but it was no use. My body felt numb, as though the fear itself was holding me in place. The soldier's eyes widened in terror, and I could see him struggle to speak, his voice breaking. It's awake. Before I could ask him what he meant, the room was filled with a deafening sound, like the earth itself was cracking open. A low rumble echoed through the floor, and the very walls seemed to shift and groan, as though something was pushing against them from the inside. The soldier's face twisted in agony, his body writhing as if in pain. You have to leave. Now. But it was too late. The ground beneath me shook violently. The soldier's screams filled the air, his body convulsing as if it was being torn apart from the inside. I could feel the tremors running through the floor, vibrating through my bones, as the entire building seemed to buckle under some unseen pressure. The air itself felt alive, thick with dread, and every instinct screamed for me to run. But I couldn't. The restraints held me firmly in place, and my body was too weak to move. The soldier's desperate cries grew louder, more frantic. It's coming for us. It's here. His voice was barely recognizable now, drowned out by the growing noise of cracking concrete and collapsing walls. He looked at me with pleading eyes, his face distorted with agony. You have to get out. Run. Suddenly, a horrifying sound rang out, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from deep within the bowels of the earth. The ground cracked wide open, and I watched in horror as a mass of darkness rose from the center of the room, swirling like a living shadow. It was an entity unlike anything I had ever seen, its form shifting, its tendrils reaching out with malicious intent. The soldier's eyes widened in terror as the creature's tendrils wrapped around him, lifting him into the air. His body jerked violently, his limbs flailing as though the very fabric of his being was being torn apart. He let out one final scream before his body was consumed by the darkness. I was paralyzed, my mind unable to comprehend what I was witnessing. The creature's tendrils stretched toward me, brushing against my skin, cold and wet, like 1,000 icy hands. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up as it came closer. And then, just as the darkness was about to consume me, I heard a voice. Not from the creature, but from somewhere deep within my own mind. Get up. Now. I didn't recognize the voice, but it was clear, commanding, full of authority. A forceful jolt ran through my body, pushing me into action. I didn't question it. I didn't have time. With every ounce of strength I had left, I twisted in the chair, pulling against the restraints. I felt the metal give way, the cold, sharp edges digging into my skin as I fought to free myself. The chair tipped over, sending me crashing to the floor, but I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet, blood running down my arms, my legs weak, but driven by terror. I had to escape. The creature was still coming for me, its tendrils snaking closer, but I was moving now, running on pure instinct. I dashed toward the door, my heart racing as the very walls of the building seemed to close in around me. The sound of the creature's growl echoed through the corridors, a low, primal sound that made my blood run cold. I didn't look back. Couldn't. As I rounded a corner, I saw an exit, a door. It was ajar, the faintest sliver of light shining through. I ran toward it, faster than I had ever run in my life, ignoring the pain in my body, the dizziness that threatened to pull me under. The door was so close. I could hear the creature now, its tendrils scraping against the walls, the air growing thicker, heavier with each passing second. But I was so close. I reached the door. Just as I was about to pull it open, I felt it. A cold grip, wrapping around my ankle, pulling me backward. My scream echoed through the hallway as I felt myself dragged away, my hands reaching desperately for the doorframe. But it was no use. The creature's tendrils had me now, and they weren't letting go. With a final burst of strength, I kicked out, using the last of my energy to break free. I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. Light flooded into the hallway as I tumbled out of the building, hitting the ground hard. I didn't stop. Couldn't. I stumbled to my feet and ran, my legs barely holding me up, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't dare look back. The only thing that mattered now was getting as far away from that place as possible. The world outside was bright, blindingly so, after the darkness of the building. The sounds of the creature faded, but the terror still clung to me like a shadow. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out beneath me. I didn't know how long I had been running, but when I finally collapsed in the middle of the street, gasping for breath, I didn't care. The nightmare had ended. Or so I thought. A few days later I tried to go back. I couldn't stop myself. The questions, the need for answers were too strong. But when I arrived at the school, it was gone. The building had vanished. There was nothing left. No rubble. No foundation. No sign that it had ever existed. Only a stretch of empty land, silent and barren. I thought I was losing my mind until I saw it. A single blackened figure, standing at the edge of the land, staring at me. Had no face. Just like the thing in the basement. The creature's voice echoed in my mind once again. You shouldn't have escaped. You're still ours. The ground beneath me trembled once more.